Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The evening air hung heavy and warm within the confines of the small apartment, contrasting the soft, cool glow of Kevin's laptop screen. As he scrolled a digital window to the world of fashion, he paused on a radiant image. An elegant black dress with a unique allure. Kevin's curiosity piqued as he zoomed in, studying its delicate design. A voice, gentle as a whisper, broke his concentration. Rose, having returned unnoticed, stood by the door, a vision with bags in hand. Her voice held a playful lilt as she commented on the unexpected choice. Surprised, he stumbled over his words, caught between defending and denying. His fingers fumbled, closing the window, a digital curtain drawn to shield his secret admiration.
I've noticed, for months now.
Her voice carried no judgment, only warmth. Kevin's face burned. The secret he'd kept buried for years, the longing glances at women's clothing, the way certain fabrics made his skin tingle with desire to feel them draped across his own body, lay exposed between them.
It's okay,
Rose continued, her brown eyes soft with understanding.
I've always wondered if there was something you weren't telling me.
The weeks that followed were filled with tentative conversations. Kevin revealed fragments of feelings he'd suppressed since childhood, how he'd always felt a disconnect between his reflection and his sense of self. Rose listened, asked questions, held him when words failed. His birthday arrived on a crisp October morning. Rose had been mysterious about his gift, only promising it would be something special. The rectangular box sat on their dining table, wrapped in silver paper that caught the morning light streaming through the blinds. "Open it," Rose urged, barely containing her excitement. Kevin's fingers trembled as he tore the wrapping paper. The lid came off, revealing tissue paper that he gently pushed aside. His breath caught in his throat. Nestled inside was the black dress from the website, the very one he'd been admiring weeks ago. Alongside it lay a small makeup kit, a pair of silicone breast forms, and a blonde wig with gentle waves that fell just past the shoulders. "I thought maybe you'd like to see," Rose said softly. "To try being who you feel you are. Even if it's just for today. Just with me." Tears welled in Kevin's eyes as he lifted the dress from the box. The chiffon skirt rippled like water between his fingers. "I don't know what to say."
"You don't have to say anything,"
Rose replied. "Just try it on. If it doesn't feel right, we never have to mention it again." The bathroom transformed into a sanctuary of discovery. Kevin removed his navy blue t-shirt and jeans, standing vulnerable in just his underwear. Rose helped position the breast forms, securing them with the special adhesive she'd researched. The weight against his chest felt strange, yet somehow right. The dress slipped over his head in a whisper of fabric, and Rose's delicate fingers worked the zipper up his back. "The wig next," she murmured, carefully arranging the blonde strands over his short brown hair. "And then, makeup." Kevin sat on the closed toilet lid as Rose worked, applying foundation that softened the angles of his face, contouring his cheekbones, adding depth to his eyes with smoky shadow. Each stroke of the brush felt like an act of revelation. When she finished with a coat of bold red lipstick, Rose stepped back. "Look," she whispered, gesturing to the mirror. The person who gazed back was someone Kevin had never met, yet had always known. The black dress hugged curves that hadn't been there before, the sweetheart neckline framing the gentle swell of the breast forms. The blonde hair softened his features, falling in loose waves that brushed against bare shoulders. But it was the eyes that struck him hardest. They were his eyes, unchanged, yet now they belonged to a face that felt congruent with the soul behind them.
"Joanna,"
he whispered, the name emerging unbidden from some deep, hidden place.
"My name is Joanna."
Rose's eyes glistened. "It's beautiful to meet you, Joanna." Tears spilled down carefully made-up cheeks. "I've waited so long to meet myself." Rose wrapped her arms around Joanna's shoulders, their eyes meeting in the mirror. "Happy birthday," she murmured. "To your first day." That evening was meant to be just between them, a private celebration of revelation. But as Joanna grew more comfortable in her skin, moving about their apartment with increasing confidence, she wondered aloud what it might be like to feel the night air against her bare shoulders, to exist in the world as herself, if only for a few hours. "We could go for a walk," Rose suggested. "Just around the block. It's dark out and our neighborhood is quiet." Fear and exhilaration battled in Joanna's chest. What if someone sees? Then they see a beautiful woman out with her girlfriend. Rose squeezed her hand. "But we don't have to. This is your night." The pull of possibility proved too strong. Joanna slipped into a pair of simple black flats, her feet too large for Rose's heels, and together they ventured into the gentle October evening. The air carried a hint of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Each step away from their apartment door felt monumental. Joanna's hand gripped Rose's like a lifeline as they descended the stairs to the street. The dress swayed around her knees, the night breeze caressing her skin in ways she'd never experienced before. "How does it feel?" Rose asked as they rounded the corner. Joanna took a deep breath, feeling the expansion of her chest against the breast forms. "Like I've been holding my breath for 30 years and finally remembered how to breathe." They walked for an hour, speaking little but communicating much through squeezed hands and meaningful glances. When they returned home, Joanna stood in the center of their living room, reluctant to remove the dress, to wash away the makeup, to return to a self that suddenly felt like an ill-fitting costume. "This doesn't have to end tonight," Rose said, seeming to read her thoughts. "This can be a beginning, if you want it to be." The days that followed were a delicate dance of revelation and caution. Joanna emerged in their private space, while Kevin maintained appearances at work and in public. But the division grew increasingly painful. Each morning that Joanna had to bind away her true self felt like a fresh wound. 3 months after her birthday revelation, Joanna sat at their kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. She wore the black dress that had become a talisman of sorts. Her blonde hair, now her own growing longer rather than the wig, tucked behind her ears. "I can't keep living half a life," she said quietly. "I need to be me, all the time, everywhere." Rose reached across the table. "I know. I've been waiting for you to realize that." The journey that followed was neither simple nor linear. There were difficult conversations with employers, with friends, with family. Some embraced Joanna immediately. Others needed time. A few relationships withered away, painful casualties of authenticity. But through it all, the black dress hung in her closet. No longer her only feminine garment, but forever the first. The key that had unlocked her truest self. 1 year later, Joanna stood before the mirror in a different dress, a deep emerald green that complemented her growing collection. Her blonde hair, now grown to her shoulders through patience and proper care, framed a face that wore makeup applied by her own increasingly skilled hands. The hormones she'd been taking for 6 months had begun their subtle work, softening her features and redistributing weight in ways that made her smile with recognition. Rose appeared in the reflection behind her, wrapping arms around her waist. "Happy 1-year anniversary," she murmured, kissing Joanna's shoulder. "Any regrets?" Joanna turned in her embrace, the green dress swirling around her knees. "Only that I waited so long to become myself." That night, as they walked hand in hand through their neighborhood, no longer furtively, but with the confidence of a woman who had claimed her place in the world, Joanna reflected on how a single gift had transformed everything. Not just the dress itself, but the gift of acceptance, of space to discover, of love that saw beyond appearances to the soul beneath. The evening was cool, and Joanna pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, the emerald dress peeking out beneath. A couple passed them on the sidewalk, nodding in casual greeting. There was no second glance, no moment of confusion, just the normal acknowledgement between neighbors. "Do you remember our first walk?" Joanna asked, squeezing Rose's hand. "How terrified I was." Rose laughed softly. "You nearly crushed my fingers." "I was sure everyone would see through me, that they'd know I wasn't really—" She paused, correcting herself. "That they'd somehow know I was just beginning my journey." "And now look at you," Rose said, with evident pride. "You're radiant." The compliment warmed Joanna's cheeks. "I'm just me. Finally." They turned onto a tree-lined street, their favorite part of their evening walks. Overhead, branches formed a canopy, strung with small white lights year-round by the neighborhood association. The effect was magical, like walking beneath stars. "I have something to ask you," Rose said, her voice taking on a nervous quality that immediately captured Joanna's attention. "That sounds ominous," Joanna replied, attempting humor to mask her sudden anxiety. Rose stopped walking, turning to face Joanna fully. The white lights overhead cast a gentle glow across her features as she reached into her jacket pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment." She pulled out a small velvet box. "I realized there's never going to be a perfect moment because every moment with you feels perfect in its own way." Joanna's breath caught as Rose opened the box, revealing a delicate silver ring with a small emerald that matched her dress exactly. "I fell in love with Kevin," Rose said, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "And I've fallen even more deeply in love with Joanna. I've watched you become yourself with such courage and grace. I want to spend my life beside you, supporting each new chapter of your journey." She took a shaky breath. "Will you marry me?" Time seemed to suspend beneath the canopy of lights. Joanna's mind flashed through memories. Kevin hunched over a laptop, yearning secretly for something he couldn't name. The first moment of seeing herself in that black dress. The gradual steps toward living authentically. And Rose, always Rose, walking beside her through every triumph and setback. "Yes," Joanna whispered, then louder. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." Rose slipped the ring onto her finger, and Joanna marveled at how right it looked there, sparkling against her skin. They kissed beneath the lights, witnessed only by the rustling leaves and distant stars. As they walked home, Joanna couldn't stop glancing at her hand, at the physical symbol of promises and possibilities. "I never imagined this future," she admitted. "Even in my most hopeful moments, I couldn't see this clearly." "That's the beautiful thing about life," Rose replied. "We can't imagine the happiness waiting for us on the other side of courage." Their apartment welcomed them home, no longer just a place where Joanna could be herself behind closed doors, but now a launching pad for a shared future where she would be wholly, completely Joanna in every aspect of her life. The black dress still hung in her closet, now among dozens of other garments that expressed different facets of her personality. She ran her fingers over its fabric, remembering the trembling hands that had first slipped it on, the tears that had fallen at that first glimpse of her authentic self. "I think," Joanna said as Rose wrapped her arms around her from behind, "that I'd like to wear the black dress for our engagement party, to honor where this all began." Rose kissed her neck. "I think that's perfect." The engagement party was held 2 months later in the courtyard of their apartment complex. Strings of the same white lights that had witnessed their engagement were hung between trees, creating an intimate glow as twilight deepened. Joanna had debated having such a public celebration. There were still moments of insecurity, still days when she worried about how the world perceived her, but the desire to celebrate with those who had supported her journey outweighed her fears. The black dress fit differently now. Hormone therapy had created subtle curves, and Joanna no longer needed the breast forms that had once been necessary to create the silhouette she desired. Her blonde hair, grown longer through dedicated care, was styled in an elegant updo, with a few tendrils framing her face. Rose had helped with her makeup, a callback to that first transformative night. Though Joanna had developed considerable skill of her own over the past year, friends arrived bearing gifts and congratulations. Colleagues from work, who had witnessed Joanna's transition with varying degrees of understanding, now raised glasses to her happiness. Rose's parents, initially hesitant but ultimately accepting, brought a vintage bottle of champagne they'd been saving for a special occasion. Notably absent were Joanna's own parents. Their silence after her coming-out letter had been a wound that still ached in quiet moments. She had sent them an invitation to the engagement party, more as an open door than with any real expectation they would attend. The party was in full swing, laughter mingling with music beneath the twinkling lights, when Rose suddenly squeezed Joanna's hand hard enough to hurt. "What is it?" Joanna asked, following Rose's gaze toward the courtyard entrance. Her heart stuttered. There, looking uncertain and out of place but undeniably present, stood her parents. Her father wore a suit that Joanna recognized from holidays and funerals. Her mother clutched a small gift bag with a white-knuckled grip. "They came?" Joanna whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. Rose squeezed her hand again, gentler this time. "Do you want me to come with you?" Joanna shook her head. "No, this is something I need to do alone." The path across the courtyard felt endless. Joanna was acutely aware of the swish of her black dress against her legs, of the eyes that followed her movement, of the thundering of her heart. Her parents watched her approach, their expressions unreadable in the dim light. "Mom? Dad?" Her voice sounded strange in her ears. "I didn't think you'd come." Her mother's eyes moved over her, taking in the dress, the hair, the makeup, all the external manifestations of the change they had refused to acknowledge. "You look," she began, then faltered. "Like myself," Joanna supplied softly. Her father cleared his throat.
Your Aunt Martha talked to us. She said we were being foolish to miss our child's happiness over our own discomfort."
His words were stiff, rehearsed perhaps, but the effort behind them was evident. "We brought you this," her mother said, extending the gift bag. "It's not much." Joanna accepted it with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a delicate silver frame. The photograph it contained made her breath catch. Joanna, as a child of perhaps 4, dressed in what had clearly been her mother's clothes and jewelry, beaming at the camera with unself-conscious joy. "I found it when we were cleaning out the attic," her mother explained. "I'd forgotten how happy you looked. It made me think that maybe—" She took a deep breath.
"Maybe we've been wrong."
Tears threatened to ruin Joanna's carefully applied makeup. "Thank you for coming," she managed to say. "It means everything that you're here." There was awkwardness still, a chasm of misunderstanding that wouldn't be bridged in a single evening. But as Joanna led her parents to meet Rose, to join the celebration of love and new beginnings, she felt a knot of pain begin to loosen. The party continued around them, friends dancing, glasses clinking, cameras capturing moments of joy. Joanna found herself drawn again and again to the photograph in its silver frame. That child had known, without words or understanding, what had taken the adult decades to acknowledge. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, Joanna and Rose slow danced beneath the lights, the black dress swirling around Joanna's knees. "Your parents' coming was quite the surprise," Rose murmured against her ear. Joanna nodded, watching over Rose's shoulder as her parents spoke with Rose's mother, the conversation appearing strained but civil. "A beginning, I think, not an ending." "The best kind of surprise, then." The music shifted to something slower, and Joanna pulled Rose closer, overwhelmed suddenly by the journey that had brought her to this moment, standing beneath stars in the arms of the woman who had seen her true self before she had fully recognized it herself. "Thank you," Joanna whispered. Rose leaned back to look at her. "For what?" "For the dress, for seeing me, for everything that followed." Understanding softened Rose's features. "I didn't do anything but provide the opportunity. You're the one who had the courage to step into your truth." As the evening drew to a close, Joanna's parents approached to say goodbye. Her mother hesitated, then leaned in for a quick, awkward embrace. "You look beautiful, Jo." She stumbled over the name, then tried again.
"Joanna. You look beautiful, Joanna."
The sound of her name on her mother's lips, for the first time, sent a shock through Joanna's system. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "For trying?" Her father nodded stiffly, managing a brief squeeze of her shoulder before they departed. It wasn't the wholehearted acceptance Joanna had once dreamed of, but it was movement, a crack in a wall she'd feared would remain forever solid. Back in their apartment, Joanna stood before the mirror, studying her reflection in the black dress that had marked the beginning of her journey. Rose appeared behind her, much as she had that first night, their eyes meeting in the glass. "What are you thinking?" Rose asked. Joanna touched the fabric of her dress, smoothing it over her hips. "I'm thinking about beginnings, about how sometimes the scariest step is the one that saves you." 6 months later, on a perfect spring day, Joanna stood in a bridal salon, surrounded by dresses in every shade of white and cream imaginable. Her blonde hair, now cascading past her shoulders, was pulled back in a loose ponytail for the fittings. Rose, by mutual agreement, was shopping separately. They wanted to surprise each other on their wedding day.
"Have you thought about what style you're looking for?" the consultant asked, a woman named Eleanor, with a kind smile and efficient manner. Joanna had thought of little else for weeks. "Something with a defined waist," she said. "And I've always loved sweetheart necklines." Eleanor nodded, making notes. "Any particular details you're drawn to? Lace? Beading? Appliques?" "I want something elegant, but not overdone." Joanna hesitated. "And I'd like it to have some connection to a black dress I own, the one that helped me find myself." Understanding dawned in Eleanor's eyes. She reached out to squeeze Joanna's hand briefly. "I think I know exactly what to pull for you. Wait right here." She returned with 3 gowns, each one more beautiful than the last. The first, a mermaid style with intricate beadwork, made Joanna feel constricted. The second, an A-line with delicate lace sleeves, was lovely but didn't stir any particular emotion. But the third, the moment Eleanor lifted it from the rack, Joanna knew. The gown featured a sweetheart neckline that immediately reminded her of the black dress, but in luminous ivory satin. The bodice was structured but not rigid, flowing into a chiffon skirt reminiscent of her first dress, but fuller, more dramatic. Along the waistline, a delicate band of crystals caught the light. "This one," Joanna said before she'd even tried it on. "I need to try this one." In the fitting room, as Eleanor helped her into the gown, Joanna was transported back to that birthday night when Rose had helped her into the black dress. The same anticipation fluttered in her stomach, the same sense of standing on a threshold. When Eleanor finished fastening the buttons that ran down the back, she guided Joanna to the pedestal before a trifold mirror. "Take a look," she said softly. Joanna lifted her gaze to the mirrors and caught her breath. The woman who looked back at her was undeniably herself. Not a version she was trying to become, not a tentative first step, but herself in full bloom. The ivory dress hugged her figure in all the right places, the hormones having worked their gradual magic over many months. Her shoulders, once a source of self-consciousness, now appeared elegant above the sweetheart neckline. "It's perfect," she whispered. Eleanor beamed. "You look stunning. Your fiancé is going to be speechless." As alterations were discussed and a veil was selected to complement the gown, Joanna found herself reflecting on the journey from that first black dress to this ivory one. Both represented transitions, one from hiding to revelation, the other from solitary journey to partnership. The wedding day arrived on a clear June morning. Joanna prepared in a suite at the hotel where the ceremony would take place, surrounded by her closest friends, and, to her continuing amazement, her mother. The relationship remained a work in progress, complex and sometimes painful, but her mother's presence as she readied herself for this milestone spoke volumes about how far they'd come. "Your hair looks beautiful," her mother said, watching as the stylist arranged Joanna's blonde locks in an elegant updo with soft tendrils framing her face. "You always did have your grandmother's color." The comment, so normal and yet so validating, brought tears to Joanna's eyes. "Thank you, Mom." When she finally stepped into her wedding dress, the room fell silent. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, Joanna, you're breathtaking." The ceremony was held in the hotel's garden,
beneath an arbor twined with white roses and greenery. Guests filled rows of white chairs on either side of a petal-strewn aisle. Joanna's father, in another step toward reconciliation, had agreed to walk her down the aisle. He waited now in the garden entrance, his expression a complex mix of emotions as he took in his daughter in her wedding gown.
"You look very nice,"
he said gruffly, the words inadequate, but the sentiment behind them genuine. "Thank you for being here, Dad," Joanna replied, taking his arm. "It means everything." The music began, a string quartet playing the piece they had selected together. As Joanna and her father moved down the aisle, she was aware of faces turning toward her. Friends, colleagues, family members who had traveled varying distances on their own journeys of acceptance. But her eyes sought only one person. Rose stood at the altar, resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that complemented her warm complexion perfectly. Her eyes widened as she caught sight of Joanna, her hands coming up to cover her heart in a gesture of overwhelming emotion. The walk seemed both eternal and instantaneous. Then Joanna was there, her father placing her hand in Rose's in a traditional gesture that felt unexpectedly right. Rose's fingers twined with hers, warm and steady. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Rose whispered, her voice catching. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. Vows exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, promises made before witnesses who had seen their love grow and transform. When the officiant pronounced them married, Rose pulled Joanna into a kiss that felt like coming home. The reception was held in the hotel's ballroom, transformed with the same white lights that had witnessed their engagement. As they shared their first dance, Rose's hand warm against the small of her back, Joanna caught sight of her parents watching from their table. Her mother wiped away a tear. Her father nodded in what appeared to be approval. "I wish I could go back and tell myself from 2 years ago that this moment was waiting," Joanna murmured against Rose's ear. "That happiness like this was possible." Rose leaned back to look at her. "What would you say to that person?" Joanna considered the question as they moved across the dance floor, her ivory dress swirling around them both. "I'd tell him that the journey would be harder than he could imagine, but infinitely more rewarding, that the person he was meant to be, that I was meant to be, was waiting beneath all the fear and pretense. And that a black dress would change everything?" Rose added with a smile. Joanna laughed softly. "That a black dress and the love of an extraordinary woman would change everything." The night unfolded in a tapestry of moments, cutting the cake, toasts that celebrated their unique journey, dances with friends who had stood by them through every step. As midnight approached, Joanna found herself on the balcony outside the ballroom, taking a moment of quiet to absorb it all. Rose joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Chen?" The new name, Joanna had taken Rose's surname, another step in crafting her true identity, sent a thrill through her. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how the universe conspired to bring us to this exact moment." "The universe had help," Rose replied, resting her head on Joanna's shoulder. "It had your courage and my stubbornness." Joanna laughed. "A formidable combination." They stood in comfortable silence, watching stars above the city lights. The journey hadn't been smooth. There had been setbacks and sorrows alongside the triumphs, But standing here in her wedding dress, beside the woman who had seen her true self even when she couldn't, Joanna felt a sense of rightness that transcended all difficulties. "Ready to go back inside, Mrs. Chen?" Rose asked, holding out her hand. Joanna took it, feeling the new weight of her wedding ring against her finger. Ready for everything that comes next. As they returned to their celebration, to the friends and family who had gathered to witness their love, Joanna caught a glimpse of herself in a decorative mirror. The woman who looked back, blonde hair arranged elegantly, ivory dress catching the light, eyes bright with joy, was so far from the person who had once hunched over a laptop, afraid to even acknowledge his deepest desires. Yet they were connected, those two selves, by a thread of authenticity that had refused to be severed, and by a black dress now hanging in a cedar closet in their apartment that had been the key to unlocking a life beyond imagining.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!